He thought he was testing me, but he had no idea I was already measuring him. The first drop hit the marble floor with a soft, almost polite sound. Not loud, not dramatic, just enough to make the room feel different. I watched it spread slowly beneath the table, dark against the gold-veined stone, and for a second, no one noticed. Not the men in tailored suits. Not the woman laughing too loudly at a joke that wasn't funny. Not even the staff rushing between tables like ghosts trained not to see what didn't concern them. But I noticed. I always notice. 2 hours earlier, I had tied my apron in the back hallway of Valence, the kind of place where a single steak cost more than my weekly rent, and nobody ever asked where you came from as long as you smiled and moved fast. The mirror there was cracked down the middle, splitting my reflection into two versions of the same girl. One looked tired. The other looked calm. Too calm for someone working a double shift on 4 hours of sleep. I flexed my fingers once before stepping out onto the floor. The muscles in my hands remembered things my life here didn't explain. Trays, glasses, balance, control. That's what people saw. They didn't see how quickly I adjusted when someone moved without warning. Didn't see how my body calculated distance without thinking. They just saw a waitress. And that was exactly the point. The dinner rush hit like a wave, orders stacking, voices blending, the air thick with expensive perfume and quiet power. Then the doors opened, and everything shifted. It wasn't loud. No announcement. No grand entrance. Just a subtle change, like the room itself took a breath and held it. I didn't have to look to know someone important had arrived. But I did anyway. He walked in like he owned the space between every table, every conversation bending slightly around him without anyone realizing it. Tall. Controlled. The kind of presence that didn't need volume to command attention. Alexander Volkov. I had heard the name before. People like him didn't belong to headlines. They belonged to whispers. I picked up a tray of drinks and moved toward table 12, steady pace, even breathing. Normal. That was the rule. Always normal. But as I passed him, something in the air shifted again. Not the room this time. Him. His eyes moved, just slightly, tracking me in a way that felt deliberate. Not curiosity. Not interest. Recognition. My grip adjusted by instinct as I stepped closer to the table. One glass tilted, just enough. A mistake, anyone else would call it. The deep red wine spilled across the edge of the table, a slow, controlled cascade that ended exactly where I allowed it to. Silence followed. Not complete. Just focused. Every sound in the room seemed to pull back, leaving space between us. I set the tray down carefully, my pulse steady, my expression unreadable. "I'm sorry," I said, soft, measured, exactly what they expected. But inside, I was already watching him. Waiting. Because men like him don't react. They respond. And when they do, it tells you everything. He looked down at the stain, then back at me. Not angry. Not yet. Just interested. Like he had just found something unexpected in a place that wasn't supposed to surprise him. And for the first time that night, I let myself wonder if maybe, just maybe, he had no idea what he had just stepped into. He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. The entire table had already gone quiet, the kind of silence that spreads without permission, subtle but absolute. I could feel every pair of eyes pretending not to look, every breath held just a fraction longer than normal. He reached for a linen napkin, slow, precise, dabbing at the edge of the glass as if the spill had been nothing more than a minor inconvenience. But his eyes never left mine. Not once. "You are either very careless," he said finally, his voice low and even, carrying just far enough for the people closest to hear, "or very brave." I kept my posture straight, shoulders relaxed, hands still. "Just doing my job," I replied. Simple. Neutral. Safe. That was what someone like me was supposed to sound like. But something in his expression shifted, almost imperceptibly, like he had just confirmed a suspicion he had not voiced yet. One of the men at his table chuckled under his breath, the kind of laugh meant to fill space, to ease tension that was not his to manage. "She should be more careful," the man added, glancing at me with a dismissive smile. "Accidents like that can be expensive." I nodded once, acknowledging the comment without engaging it. Then I reached for the cloth at my side, moving to clean the table. My movements were efficient, controlled, practiced. But as I leaned slightly forward, his hand moved. Not fast, not aggressive, just enough to stop mine before it touched the surface. The contact was brief, deliberate, and then gone. But it said everything. Control. Boundary. Test. I looked at his hand, then back at his eyes. No flinch. No hesitation. That was when the room shifted again. Because now it was not just about a spilled drink. Now it was about who would move first. Leave it, he said. I straightened slowly. Sir, I can take care of it. I am sure you can. A pause. Measured. Intentional. The question is, what else can you take care of? The words were smooth, almost conversational, but there was something underneath them, something sharp and deliberate. He was not asking about the table. He was asking about me, testing the edges of something he did not understand yet. I could feel it now, the weight of his attention, heavier than before. Not dismissive, not casual, focused, curious, dangerous in a way that had nothing to do with anger. I forced a small, polite smile, the kind that kept tips coming and questions away. I handle whatever is on my shift. Another safe answer. Another line drawn exactly where it was expected. But his gaze did not move. If anything, it sharpened. Like he was listening to something beyond the words. Like he was watching the space between them. One of his associates shifted in his seat. Boss, we have the meeting in 30 minutes, he said quietly. A reminder. A way out. But Alexander Volkov did not look away. Cancel it, he said, just as quietly. The man blinked, clearly surprised, but nodded without argument. Of course he did. Men like that did not get questioned. They got obeyed. And just like that, the air changed again. The room felt smaller, tighter, like something had just been set in motion that could not be undone. He leaned back slightly in his chair, studying me with a kind of calm interest that felt far more dangerous than anger ever could. Tell me, he said, his voice softer now, almost thoughtful. Do you always move like that? I tilted my head slightly, letting confusion show just enough to be believable. Like what? A faint smile touched his lips, but it did not reach his eyes. Like you were waiting for something. I held his gaze for 1 second longer than necessary. Then I looked down, just enough to break the moment without surrendering it. I think you are reading too much into it, I said. But inside, something had already shifted. Because he was not wrong. And for the first time that night, I realized something else. He was not the only one doing the testing anymore. The manager noticed. Of course he did. Men like him always notice when the rhythm of a room breaks, even slightly. I felt his eyes from across the floor, sharp and anxious, calculating how much this moment might cost him. A table like this did not get mistakes. It did not get tension. It definitely did not get attention. But here we were, and I had not moved. Neither had he. You should get back to work, the manager said as he approached, his voice tight but polite, directed at me, but meant for the man sitting in front of me. A quiet attempt to restore order, to remind everyone of their roles. I turned my head slightly, acknowledging him, but I did not step away. Not yet. Because I knew something he did not. This was no longer about the restaurant. Alexander Volkov leaned back in his chair, one arm resting casually against the polished wood, as if he had all the time in the world. She is working, he said, his tone calm, almost amused. I am just deciding how well. The manager hesitated, caught between authority and fear, then gave me a tight nod before stepping back. Retreating. The right choice. Always the right choice around men like him. I picked up the cloth again, slower this time, giving him exactly what he had asked for without looking like I was complying. Every movement measured. Every second stretched. The table was already clean. It had been clean for a while now. But I kept wiping, tracing the same invisible line, because this was not about the stain anymore. It was about patience. And who would run out of it first? Most people, he said after a moment, would be nervous by now. I let out a quiet breath, just enough to be heard. Most people are easier to predict. His eyes narrowed slightly. There it was again. That flicker of something deeper. Not irritation. Not ego. Interest. The kind that sharpens instead of fades. One of the glasses on the tray beside me rattled softly as someone passed too close, but my hand steadied it before it could tip. Reflex. Fast. Too fast. And he saw it. Of course he did. His gaze dropped to my hand, then lifted back to my face, slower this time. More deliberate. You have done that before, he said. Not a question. A statement. I tilted my head again, letting a small frown form. Carrying trays? No, a pause. Just long enough to stretch the silence thin. Catching things that fall. The room felt quieter now. Not because people had stopped talking, but because none of it mattered anymore. There was only this space, this conversation, this line neither of us had stepped over yet. I placed the cloth down gently, folding it once before setting it aside. No rush. No hesitation. Then I looked at him fully for the first time. Not as staff. Not as someone passing by. But as someone choosing to stay. You seem very sure of what you were seeing, I said. His lips curved slightly, but there was no warmth in it. I am rarely wrong. I nodded once, as if considering that. As if weighing it. That must make things simple. It does. Another pause. This one heavier. Charged. Until it does not. The words slipped out before I could stop them. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just true. And for the first time since he had walked in, something shifted in his expression. Not much. Just enough. Like a crack in something carefully controlled. He stood then. Slowly. The chair moved back with a quiet scrape against the floor, and every person within 10 feet felt it. Power does not need noise. It creates it. He stepped closer, close enough now that the space between us felt intentional. Chosen. Then let us test that, he said, his voice low enough that only I could hear it. After your shift. I did not move. Did not step back. Did not agree. But I did not refuse either. And that was enough. Because as he turned and walked away, I realized something I had not planned for. This was no longer just a role I was playing. This was a game. And he had just invited me to finish it. The rest of the night moved, but I did not feel it. Orders came in. Plates went out. Glasses clinked. People laughed at things that did not matter. And through all of it, one thought stayed still, anchored somewhere just beneath my ribs. After your shift. I repeated it once in my head, not because I needed to remember, but because I needed to understand why I had not said no. I had every reason to. Every instinct should have pushed me away from that kind of attention, from that kind of man. But instincts are shaped by experience. And mine had been trained differently. I finished clearing table 12 without looking in his direction again, even though I could feel him somewhere in the room, like a presence that did not need eyes to be noticed. My manager approached me the second I stepped into the service corridor, his voice low and urgent. What was that? He asked, running a hand through his hair. Do you know who that is? I grabbed a fresh tray, stacking glasses with steady hands. A customer, I said. Simple. Clean. Safe. He stared at me like I had just said something completely unreasonable. That is not just a customer, he said, his voice dropping even lower. That is the kind of man you stay away from. You do your job, you keep your head down, and you do not get involved. I nodded once, not because I agreed, but because that was what he needed to see. Compliance. Reassurance. Control. It was just a conversation, I said. But even as the words left my mouth, I knew they were not true. Conversations end. This had not. He exhaled sharply, clearly not convinced, but too busy to argue further. Just be careful, he muttered before moving on. Careful. The word lingered for a moment, then faded. Careful was not something I had been in a long time. The shift dragged after that, each minute stretching longer than the last. Not because of the work. I could do this part without thinking. But because of what came after. Anticipation is a strange thing. It does not feel like fear. Not exactly. It feels sharper, cleaner, like standing on the edge of something you have already decided to step into. By the time the clock hit 11:45, the restaurant had started to empty. The noise softened. The lights dimmed just slightly, shifting from performance to closure. I untied my apron in the back, folding it neatly before placing it in the bin. Routine. Familiar. Grounding. The mirror was still cracked, still splitting me into two versions of the same person. But this time, neither looked tired. Both looked awake. I reached for my jacket, slipping it on slowly, feeling the weight settle across my shoulders. Not protection. Not comfort. Just preparation. When I stepped outside, the air was cooler than I expected, the kind that clears your head whether you want it to or not. The street was quieter now, the city pulling back just enough to feel different. I spotted the car immediately. Parked across the street. Engine off. Lights dark. But it did not need to announce itself. Some things never do. I could have walked the other way. Turned the corner. Disappeared into the night like none of this had ever happened. That was the easy choice. The smart choice. The expected choice. Instead, I crossed the street. Each step steady. Measured. Intentional. The door on the passenger side unlocked before I reached it. Of course it did. I paused for exactly 1 second, my hand resting lightly on the handle. Not hesitation, just acknowledgement. Then I opened it and slid inside. The door closed with a soft click, sealing the space around us. He did not look at me right away. His hands rested loosely on the steering wheel, posture relaxed, like he had been waiting for something he already knew would happen. "I was not sure you would come," he said after a moment. I leaned back in the seat, eyes forward, matching his calm with my own. "I was not sure you were worth the time," I replied. A quiet beat passed between us. Then, slowly, he turned his head, and for the first time that night, there was something unmistakable in his expression. Not just interest, not just curiosity, recognition. "Good," he said softly. "I would have been disappointed if you were easy." And just like that, I understood exactly what this was. Not a meeting, not a mistake, a test. And the only question left was who had just agreed to take it. The engine started without a sound that mattered, smooth and controlled, like everything else about him. The city lights slid across the windshield as we pulled away from the curb, the restaurant shrinking behind us until it disappeared completely. No questions, no directions. He drove like he already knew where this was going, and maybe he did. I rested my elbow lightly against the door, fingers brushing the cool glass, watching the reflection of passing streetlights flicker across my skin in steady intervals. 10 seconds. 20. 30. Silence can say more than conversation ever will. "You are not curious?" he asked finally. "I still on the road." I let out a quiet breath, almost a laugh, but not quite. "About what?" "Where I am taking you." I turned my head slightly, studying the side of his face, the sharp line of his jaw, the calm in his expression that never quite relaxed. "If I was worried, I would not be here," I said. He nodded once, as if that answer confirmed something he had already decided. "That is not the same as curiosity." "No," I agreed softly. "It is not." Another pause settled between us, but this one felt different. Not tense, not heavy, just aware. Like both of us were measuring something we had not named yet. The car turned off the main road, the lights growing dimmer as we moved into a quieter part of the city. Fewer buildings, fewer people, more space between everything. I recognized the shift immediately, not because I had been here before, but because places like this always feel the same. Controlled, private, intentional. He pulled into a parking structure, the concrete walls echoing faintly as the car rolled to a stop. The engine cut, and the silence that followed felt sharper than before. He did not move right away. Neither did I. For a moment, we just sat there, the air between us steady, unbroken. Then he reached for the door handle and stepped out. I watched him walk around the front of the car, his movements unhurried, precise. No wasted motion. No hesitation. He opened my door without a word, stepping back just enough to give me space. Not courtesy. Not exactly. More like expectation. I stepped out, my shoes meeting the concrete with a soft, controlled sound. The air here was cooler, the kind that settles into your lungs and stays there. The structure was mostly empty, a few cars scattered far apart, their shadows stretching long under the overhead lights. He gestured toward a door at the far end, one that led deeper inside the building. "This way," he said. Simple, direct. I followed. Not behind him, not quite beside him either. Just close enough to match his pace without aligning with it. The hallway beyond the door was narrow, dimly lit, the sound of our footsteps echoing softly against the walls. Every step felt intentional. Every second stretched just enough to matter. At the end of the corridor, he stopped in front of another door, this one heavier, reinforced. He paused, his hand resting lightly against the handle, then glanced at me over his shoulder. "You can still leave," he said. The words were calm, almost casual, but there was something underneath them. Not a warning, not a threat, a line. I held his gaze, steady, unflinching. "If I wanted to leave," I said, "I would not have followed you this far." A faint shift in his expression. Approval. Maybe. Or something close to it. He opened the door. The space inside was larger than I expected. Open. Clean. Controlled. No distractions. No excess. Just a wide floor, marked lightly, the kind of place designed for movement, for precision, for focus. My eyes adjusted quickly, taking in the details without lingering on any one thing. He stepped inside, then turned to face me fully for the first time since we had left the car. "Now," he said, his voice quieter, more deliberate, "we find out if I was right." I took one step forward, then another, feeling the space under my feet, the balance of it, the quiet hum of something familiar settling back into place. My hands relaxed at my sides, fingers loose, breathing steady. Not nervous, not hesitant, just ready. I met his gaze, holding it without effort. "No," I said softly. "Now we find out if you were wrong." He did not move into the center of the room right away. He stayed where he was, just inside the doorway, watching me with that same quiet focus, like he was waiting for something to reveal itself without forcing it. I understood that instinct. Force changes behavior. Patience reveals truth. I took another step forward, then another, letting the distance between us stretch just enough to define the space. The floor beneath my feet felt familiar, even though I had never been here before. Smooth, balanced, built for control, not chaos. I rolled my shoulders once, slow, subtle, letting the tension settle into something usable instead of something reactive. He noticed. Of course he did. "That is not something you learn carrying trays," he said, his voice calm, almost observational. I did not answer. Words were unnecessary now. This part was not about explanation. It was about presence. He walked toward me then, unhurried, each step measured, stopping about 6 feet away. Close enough to engage. Far enough to observe. "I do not like surprises," he continued. "And you?" A slight pause, just enough to sharpen the sentence. "Feel like one." I let a small breath out through my nose. Not quite a smile, not quite a dismissal. "Then maybe you should have stayed at dinner," I said. His gaze held mine, steady, unblinking. "Or maybe I should have paid closer attention sooner." That landed differently. Not as a challenge. As a realization. I shifted my weight slightly, grounding through my feet, letting my body settle into alignment without making it obvious. My hands remained relaxed at my sides, but there was intention now, a quiet readiness that did not need to be announced. He saw that too. His posture changed, not dramatically, just enough. Shoulders loosening. Stance adjusting. Not aggression. Not yet. Just preparation. Recognition meeting recognition. "Show me," he said. Simple. Direct. No theatrics. No raised voice. Just expectation. I tilted my head slightly, studying him the same way he had been studying me all night. "You brought me here," I replied softly. "You already think you know what you are looking at." A faint shift in his expression. Not irritation. Something closer to respect. "I think," he said carefully, "that you have been pretending." I let that sit between us for a second. Then another. "And I think," I answered, my voice just as controlled, "that you are used to people letting you be right." Silence followed. Not empty. Not passive. Charged. The kind that builds pressure without making a sound. He took one step closer. Not enough to invade. Just enough to test. "And you are not one of those people?" he asked. I met his gaze without hesitation. "No," I said simply. That was the moment it shifted. Not into action. Not into anything physical or dramatic. Just alignment. Like two lines finally crossing after running parallel for too long. He exhaled slowly, almost like he was resetting something internally, then gave a small nod. "Good," he said. "Then we can be honest." He stepped back half a pace, giving the space room to breathe, then gestured lightly with one hand. "No rules," he added. "No expectations." I let my eyes move around the room once more, taking in the walls, the distance, the quiet hum of a place designed for control. Then I looked back at him. "There are always rules," I said. His brow lifted slightly, interested. "Then tell me yours." I held his gaze, steady, unflinching. "Do not underestimate me," I said. The words were quiet. Simple. But they landed. I could see it in the way his expression stilled, in the way his focus sharpened just a fraction more. Not dismissive anymore. Not curious. Engaged. Fully. "Fair," he replied. Another beat of silence passed between us. Heavier now, more deliberate. Then he added, softer this time, "And yours?" I tilted my head slightly, a faint echo of something almost like a smile touching my expression. "Do not disappoint me." And just like that, whatever this was, it was no longer his test. It was ours. He did not rush. That was the first thing I noticed. No sudden movement. No attempt to dominate the space with speed or force. Just a slow, deliberate shift forward, like he understood that control was not about how fast you moved, but when. I matched him without thinking. One step, then stillness. The distance between us remained constant, but the tension inside it changed. Sharper now. More defined. This was no longer conversation. This was translation. His body spoke in quiet adjustments. Shoulders angled slightly. Weight balanced evenly. Eyes locked, not wandering, not distracted. He was not guessing anymore. He was reading. I let my breathing settle into a steady rhythm. In through my nose. Out through my mouth. Controlled and quiet. My hands stayed loose, fingers relaxed, but my awareness sharpened, narrowing the world down to him and the space between us. Everything else faded. The walls. The lights. The sound of the city somewhere above us. None of it mattered. You are not afraid, he said, almost to himself. I tilted my head slightly. You noticed that late. A faint exhale from him, not quite a laugh. Most people hide it better. Most people feel it, I replied. Another step. This time closer. Not aggressive. Just enough to test the boundary again. I did not step back. I did not step forward either. I held the line exactly where it was. That was the moment something in his eyes shifted. Not curiosity anymore. Recognition. Real, undeniable recognition. You have done this before, he said quietly. Not a question. A conclusion. I let the silence stretch just long enough to confirm it without words. Then I moved. Not fast. Not sudden. Just a small adjustment of my stance. Turning slightly, shifting my center in a way that changed everything without appearing dramatic. But he saw it. Of course he did. His gaze dropped for half a second, tracking the movement, then lifted again, sharper now. More focused. There it is, he murmured. That is what I saw. I did not answer. I did not need to. Because now he understood. Not everything. Not yet. But enough. He took another step, closing the distance to just a few feet, close enough that I could see the slight change in his breathing, the controlled rise and fall of his chest, the precision behind it. He was not careless. Not reckless. He was measured. And that made him dangerous in a different way. But not unpredictable. Do you always wait this long? I asked quietly. His brow lifted slightly. For what? To realize you are not in control. The words landed between us, soft but deliberate. And for a second, the room felt completely still. Then, slowly, his lips curved into something that was not quite a smile, but not far from it. Control, he said, almost thoughtfully, is not about being first. He took one final step forward, stopping just within reach. It is about being right. I held his gaze, unblinking. Then you should hope you are, I said. Because in that moment, I could see it clearly. The shift. The balance tipping. Not fully. Not yet, but enough to matter. He was no longer testing to confirm his assumptions. He was testing to understand mine. And that changed everything. The air between us felt different now. Not heavy. Not tense. Focused. Like the moment before something begins. He lifted one hand slightly, not touching, not reaching, just marking the space between us, acknowledging it. A silent question. A silent invitation. I did not move away. I did not lean in. I stayed exactly where I was. And that was my answer. His eyes held mine for one more second. Then he nodded once, almost imperceptibly. Agreement. Acceptance. The test was no longer one-sided. It never had been. And now he knew it. The first movement did not look like a strike. It looked like a question. A slight shift forward. A subtle change in angle. The kind of motion most people would miss because it did not announce itself. But I saw it. Of course I did. My body responded before thought had time to catch up, adjusting just enough, stepping half an inch to the side, letting the space between us change without breaking it. His hand stopped mid-motion, not because he had to, but because he chose to. That was the second thing I noticed. He was not trying to overwhelm. He was trying to understand. Interesting, he said quietly, lowering his hand again, resetting his stance without losing balance. I did not answer. I let the silence do what it needed to do. He circled slightly, not fully, just enough to change his perspective, to see me from a different angle. I turned with him, maintaining the distance, never letting him slip behind my awareness. The floor beneath us felt smaller now, more defined, like it had narrowed down to a space where only precision mattered. You do not react, he observed. You anticipate. I exhaled slowly, keeping my rhythm steady. Reaction is slower, I said. His gaze sharpened again, not surprised anymore, but engaged in a way that felt deeper than before. And anticipation requires experience. I did not deny it. I did not confirm it either. Instead, I moved. Not forward. Not back. Just a shift in weight, a subtle repositioning that changed the line between us, forcing him to adjust without realizing it at first. But he caught it. He always did. His foot moved slightly, correcting the angle, re-establishing control. Or trying to. That was when I saw it. The smallest opening. Not physical. Structural. A pattern in how he moved. How he preferred to lead the exchange, to guide rather than follow. It was efficient. Controlled. Predictable. I stepped in, just enough to challenge that pattern, then stopped. No contact. No force. Just presence. His body responded instantly, adjusting, recalibrating, but there it was again. That same preference. That same structure. And now I understood it. His eyes locked onto mine, something new flickering there. Not curiosity. Not even recognition this time. Calculation. He had seen it too. The moment the balance shifted. You were studying me, he said. I tilted my head slightly. You invited me to. A quiet beat passed. Then another. Neither of us moved. Because now movement meant commitment. And commitment meant consequence. He took a slow breath, then stepped back half a pace, creating space again, resetting the dynamic. Smart. Very smart. Most people would have pushed forward, tried to reclaim control immediately. He chose patience instead. You are not what you pretend to be, he said. Not an accusation. A statement of fact. I let a faint hint of a smile touch my expression, just enough to acknowledge the truth without giving it away. Neither are you. That landed. I saw it in the slight tightening of his jaw, the way his focus narrowed just a fraction more. Not offended. Not defensive. Just aware. More than before. Fair, he said after a moment. Then he stepped forward again, slower this time, more deliberate, adjusting his approach, testing a different angle, a different rhythm. Adapting. Learning. That was the third thing I noticed. He was not just controlled. He was evolving. And that made this more dangerous. More interesting. I mirrored him, matching the change without hesitation, letting my movements stay just unpredictable enough to keep him from settling into a pattern. The air between us felt sharper now, charged with something neither of us had named, something that did not need words. This was no longer about proving anything. It was about understanding it. Tell me, he said quietly, his voice lower now, more focused. How long have you been hiding this? I met his gaze, steady, unshaken. Long enough, I replied. Another pause. Then he nodded once, slowly, as if accepting that answer for what it was. Not complete, not detailed, but enough. And in that moment, I realized something else. He was not trying to win anymore. Not yet. He was trying to see how far this could go. And for the first time since we stepped into this room, I felt it clearly. The shift was no longer coming. It was already happening. The rhythm changed again, but this time it was not subtle. It was deliberate. He stopped circling, stopped adjusting. For a brief moment, he stood completely still, like he had reached a decision he was no longer interested in hiding. I felt it immediately. The shift from observation to intent. My breathing slowed, deeper now, more controlled, anchoring me in place as the space between us tightened without either of us moving closer. You are holding back, he said, his voice quieter than before, but heavier, like each word carried weight instead of sound. I did not deny it. That would have been pointless. Instead, I let my gaze soften just slightly, not in weakness, but in acknowledgement. So are you, I replied. A faint exhale left him, something between agreement and amusement. Yes, he said. I am. That honesty landed differently than anything else he had said so far. No performance. No control layered over it. Just truth. And truth changes the game. Because once it is spoken, you cannot go back to pretending. He stepped forward again, but this time there was no testing in it. No hesitation. Just a clean, direct movement that closed the distance by another foot. I did not step back. I did not step forward. I stayed exactly where I was, letting him come to the edge of my space without crossing it completely. That line still mattered. For both of us. His eyes searched mine, not for weakness, not for fear, but for something else entirely. Permission. Not spoken. Not asked. But there. Clear as anything. And that was when I understood something I had not fully seen before. He was not trying to take control. He was trying to earn it. Slowly, deliberately, I shifted my stance again. Not defensive. Not reactive. Just ready. The kind of readiness that does not announce itself, but changes everything once it is there. His gaze dropped for half a second, tracking the movement, then lifted again, sharper than before. Focused. Locked. There, he said softly. That is it. I did not ask what he meant. I already knew. Because I felt it too. The moment where holding back becomes a choice instead of a necessity. The moment where the line between restraint and action starts to blur. He raised his hand again, not fast, not sudden, but with more intention this time. Not a question anymore. A statement. And this time, I responded. Not by retreating, not by avoiding, but by meeting it. My movement was small, precise, almost invisible to anyone who did not know what to look for. But he saw it. Of course he did. Our hands did not collide. They aligned, redirected, controlled. The motion ended before it could become anything more, but the message was clear. I was not avoiding him. I was engaging him. His expression changed then, not dramatically, but enough. The calm control remained, but underneath it, something sharper surfaced. Respect. Real, undeniable respect. You have trained, he said, quieter now, more certain. I let a small breath out, not quite a confirmation, but close enough. So have you, I answered. Another pause. But this one felt different from all the others. Not tension, not testing. Recognition meeting recognition on equal ground. He stepped back slightly, just enough to reset the space between us again, but this time it did not feel like he was reclaiming control. It felt like he was making room for something else. Something bigger than just this moment. What are you? He asked finally. The question was simple, but the weight behind it was not. I held his gaze, steady, unflinching, letting the silence stretch just long enough to matter. Then I answered. Someone you did not expect. His lips curved slightly, but his eyes stayed sharp, focused, locked onto mine like he was memorizing something he knew would matter later. No, he said quietly. You are someone I should have. And in that moment, I realized the balance had shifted completely. Not because one of us had won, but because neither of us was pretending anymore. The space between us did not feel like distance anymore. It felt like a line that had already been crossed, even though neither of us had stepped past it in the way most people would understand. Something had shifted, settled into place, and now everything moved differently because of it. He exhaled slowly, his gaze never leaving mine, like he was committing something to memory instead of reacting to it. That alone told me more than anything else. Men like him did not memorize what they did not value. You changed your pace, he said quietly. Not a question. An observation sharpened by attention. I tilted my head slightly, considering him the same way. So did you. A faint pause followed, but this one was lighter. Not tension. Adjustment. Like both of us were recalibrating at the same time, aware that whatever came next would not look like what came before. He stepped to the side then, not circling, not testing, just shifting position in a way that opened the space instead of closing it. That was new. That was different. He was no longer trying to corner the moment. He was giving it room. I followed the change, turning just enough to keep him in front of me, my posture relaxed but precise, my breathing steady, even. Most people, he said, his voice quieter now, more thoughtful than before, show what they are the moment they are challenged. I let a small breath out, almost a smile, but not quite. Most people are trying to prove something. His eyes narrowed slightly, not in suspicion, but in focus. And you are not. I held his gaze without hesitation. No, I said simply. I already know. That landed. I saw it in the way his expression stilled, the way his attention sharpened without becoming rigid. Not threatened, not defensive, just engaged in a deeper way than before. He nodded once, slow, deliberate, like he had just confirmed something that mattered. Confidence without display, he murmured. That is rare. I did not respond. Compliments are just another form of testing when they come from someone like him. He took a step closer again, but this time it did not feel like pressure. It felt like alignment. Like he was meeting me where I was instead of trying to pull me somewhere else. You are not here to win, he said. I tilted my head slightly. Neither are you. Another pause. But this one was different. Not silence. Understanding. No, he admitted. I am here to see how far this goes. The honesty in that statement settled into the space between us, grounding it, changing the tone of everything that followed. Because now there was no pretense left. No hidden intention. Just direction. I shifted my weight again, a subtle adjustment that changed the line between us, not breaking it, but refining it. He mirrored the movement almost immediately, not perfectly, but close enough to show he was no longer leading alone. That was the moment I realized it fully. This was no longer his test. It had not been for a while. He just had not said it out loud yet. His eyes tracked my movement, slower now, more deliberate, like he was not just watching what I did, but how I chose to do it. You control space differently, he said. You do not take it. You redefine it. I let that sit for a second, then answered quietly. Taking space creates resistance. A slight shift in his expression. Interest. Real interest. And redefining it, he asked. Makes people step into it without realizing, I replied. Silence followed again, but this time it was not charged. It was clear, like something had been resolved without needing to be spoken further. He stepped back half a pace, giving the space room to breathe again, but his eyes never left mine. Not once. You could have said no, he said after a moment. The words were simple, but the meaning behind them was not. I met his gaze, steady, unshaken. So could you. Another pause. Then, slowly, his lips curved into something that was not quite a smile, but closer than before. That would have been a mistake, he said. I let a faint hint of something mirror that expression, just enough to acknowledge it without giving anything away. Yes, I agreed softly. It would have been. And in that moment, I understood something with complete clarity. This was no longer about who had the upper hand. It was about who recognized the shift first. And judging by the way he was looking at me now, I was not the only one who had already seen it. He did not move for a long second. Not because he could not. Because he chose not to. And that choice said more than anything else he had done tonight. I watched it happen in real time. The way his posture remained open. The way his breathing stayed even. The way his eyes did not flick away from mine even for a fraction of a second. He was not looking for an exit anymore. He was settling into the moment. Accepting it. That was rare. I shifted my weight slightly, letting the movement be visible this time. Not hidden, not subtle, just enough to see how he would respond. He did not mirror it immediately. Instead, he waited, observed, then adjusted half a beat later, not copying, but adapting. That difference mattered. It meant he was no longer reacting to me. He was thinking with me. You stopped testing, I said quietly. He exhaled through his nose, almost thoughtful. No, he replied. I stopped pretending it was a test. That landed deeper than anything else he had said, because it was not about control anymore. It was about recognition. I let the silence stretch for a moment, letting that truth settle between us before answering. Good, I said softly, because I was getting bored. A faint shift in his expression, something sharper this time, something closer to amusement, but still grounded in focus. You are not easy to impress, he said. I tilted my head slightly. You are not trying to impress me. He paused, just briefly, then nodded once. No, he admitted. I am not. Another shift. Subtle, but undeniable. The space between us felt lighter now, not because the tension was gone, but because it had changed form. It was no longer resistance. It was alignment. He stepped closer again, but this time there was no edge to it, no test hidden inside the movement. Just presence. Clear. Intentional. I did not hold my ground this time. I adjusted with him, a small step that brought us into a new balance point, closer than before, but still controlled. Still precise. His eyes dropped for a fraction of a second, not to my hands, not to my stance, but to the way I moved. The timing. The choice. Then they lifted again, sharper than before. You choose when to engage, he said. I nodded once. And when not to. That kind of control, he continued, does not come from training alone. I held his gaze, letting that statement sit without confirming or denying it. Because some things are not meant to be explained. They are meant to be understood. He seemed to accept that, his expression settling into something more certain, more grounded. You have lived this, he said quietly. Not a question, a realization. I let a small breath out, not quite an answer, but enough. And you have built around it, I replied. That made him still. Not completely, just enough. The smallest shift in his shoulders, the faintest tightening in his focus. I had seen something. Not everything, but enough. His lips curved slightly, not into a smile, but into acknowledgement. Careful, he said softly. You are starting to read me. I met his gaze. Without hesitation. You asked for honesty. Another pause. But this one felt different. Not measured. Not controlled. Real. He stepped back half a pace, creating space again, but not to reset, not to regain anything. Just to see. To look at the moment from a distance. To understand it fully. I stayed where I was, letting him take that space without following. Because now, movement was no longer necessary to prove anything. He studied me for a long second, his eyes moving slightly, not scanning, but processing. Then he nodded once, slow and certain. You passed, he said. I raised an eyebrow slightly. That was not the point. His gaze sharpened again, but there was something else in it now. Not just respect. Not just interest. Something deeper. No, he agreed. It was not. A quiet breath left him, and for the first time since we stepped into this room, there was no edge in it at all. Just clarity. The point, he continued, was to see if you were worth remembering. I held his gaze, steady, unshaken, letting the silence answer for me before I spoke. And he did not hesitate, not even for a second. You are. And just like that, the entire dynamic shifted again, not into something smaller, into something bigger. Because being remembered by someone like him was not an ending. It was a beginning. He did not look away after saying it. That was the part that mattered. Most people would have softened the moment, shifted their gaze, broken the intensity to make it easier to carry. He did not. He let it stay exactly where it was, heavy and clear, like he understood the weight of his own words and had no intention of taking them back. I held his gaze for a second longer, just enough to acknowledge it without reacting to it. Because reaction would have changed the balance again, and I had no interest in doing that. Not now. Not when everything had finally settled into something real. That is a dangerous thing, I said quietly. His brow lifted slightly. Being remembered? I nodded once. By the wrong person. A faint shift crossed his expression, not quite a smile, not quite a warning. Something in between. And you think I am the wrong person? He asked. I tilted my head slightly, considering him, not just the man in front of me, but everything he represented. The control, the influence, the kind of presence that reshapes the space around it without asking permission. I think, I said slowly, you are not used to people choosing whether they want to be remembered by you. That landed. I saw it in the way his focus sharpened, in the way the air between us shifted just slightly, like something had been turned over and examined from a different angle. Not challenged, not threatened, just seen. And you are choosing? He asked. I let the silence stretch for a moment, not because I needed time, but because the answer mattered more when it was not rushed. I have not decided yet, I said. Honest, direct, uncomplicated. He nodded once, slow, deliberate, like he respected that answer more than anything else I could have said. Good, he replied. You should not decide quickly. Another pause followed, but this one felt different. Not about tension, not about testing. About direction. He stepped to the side again, creating a slight angle between us, not breaking the connection, just changing it. I stayed where I was, letting him move without following, because now it was not about maintaining distance. It was about understanding it. You could walk away from this, he said after a moment. The words were simple, but they carried weight. Not a suggestion, not a command, a possibility. I considered it, not in the way most people would, weighing risk against safety, but in a quieter, more precise way, measuring what leaving would mean versus what staying might cost. So could you, I answered. He exhaled softly, something thoughtful in the sound. I do not walk away from things that interest me. I met his gaze, steady, unshaken. Neither do I. Another shift. Subtle, but final in a way the others had not been. Because now there was no uncertainty left. Not about the moment. Not about the choice. Just about what came next. He stepped closer again, but this time there was no testing in it, no calculation layered over the movement. Just presence. Clear. Certain. I did not step back. I did not step forward. I stayed exactly where I was, letting the space close naturally, without force, without resistance. His eyes searched mine one more time, not for answers, not for weakness, but for something else entirely. Confirmation. And he found it. You are not just passing through this, he said quietly. I shook my head once. No, a faint nod from him, almost imperceptible, but enough. Neither am I. Silence settled again, but this time it felt complete. Not waiting for something. Not building toward anything. Just there. Solid. Real. I let out a slow breath, feeling the shift fully now, the way everything that had started as a test had turned into something neither of us had planned, but both of us understood. Then this is where it changes, I said softly. His gaze held mine, steady, unwavering. "No," he replied, just as quiet. "This is where it begins." And for the first time since I stepped into that room, I believed him. The room did not change, but everything inside it had. The distance between us remained the same, the walls still silent, the air still cool and steady, but something deeper had settled into place, something neither of us could undo even if we wanted to. I felt it in the way my breathing slowed without effort, in the way my body no longer held that quiet readiness to react, but instead rested in something more deliberate. Chosen. He watched me with that same focused intensity, but it was different now. Not searching, not testing, knowing. That was the shift. Not discovery, recognition. "You believe me," he said quietly, not as a question, but as a realization forming in real time. I tilted my head slightly, letting the moment stretch just long enough to give the answer weight. "I understand you," I replied. His expression stilled for half a second, then sharpened again, not defensive, not guarded, but interested in a way that went deeper than before. "That is more dangerous," he said. I let a faint breath leave me, almost a laugh, but softer. "Only if you are not used to being understood." A quiet pause followed, but it did not feel heavy anymore. It felt clear, like everything unnecessary had been stripped away, leaving only what mattered. He stepped back then, not to create distance, but to see me fully, to take in the moment without standing inside it. His hands moved to his jacket, adjusting it slightly, a small, controlled motion that carried the same precision as everything else he did. But even that felt different now. Less armor, more habit. "Lily Hayes," he said, my name steady on his tongue, like he had already decided it belonged in his world. I did not ask how he knew it. Men like him always knew. I just held his gaze, letting him say it without reacting. "Alexander Volkov." I answered, not because I needed to, but because names have weight when they are chosen, not assumed. A faint nod from him, acknowledging the exchange for what it was. Not introduction. Recognition made official. He glanced toward the door for a brief second, then back at me, his focus returning without hesitation. "If you walk out of here," he said, his voice calm, "even, this ends exactly as it is." I listened carefully, not to the words, but to what sat underneath them. Not a threat, not a warning, a boundary. "And if I do not?" I asked. His gaze held mine, unwavering. "Then it does not end." Silence followed, but this time it carried no uncertainty, just clarity, because now the choice was real, not abstract, not implied, defined. I let my eyes move around the room one last time, taking in the space where everything had shifted, where something simple had turned into something neither of us had planned. Then I looked back at him. "You do not chase things," I said softly. He shook his head once. "No," I nodded. "Good." A faint flicker of curiosity crossed his expression. "Why?" I met his gaze, steady, certain. "Because if you had to chase me," I said, "I would not be worth your time." That landed. Not as a challenge. Not as a test. As truth. His lips curved slightly, but his eyes stayed sharp, focused, locked onto mine in a way that felt more intentional than anything else that had happened tonight. "And are you?" he asked. I held his gaze, unshaken, letting the answer settle before I spoke. "You already know the answer to that." Another pause. Then, slowly, he nodded, the movement small but absolute. "Yes," he said. I took a step back then, not retreating, not breaking anything, just shifting the space one final time. He did not follow. He did not need to. The distance between us now was not separation. It was understanding. I turned toward the door, my hand resting lightly on the handle, feeling the cool metal beneath my fingers. For a second, I paused, not out of hesitation, but acknowledgement. Then I glanced back over my shoulder, meeting his eyes one last time. "Next time," I said quietly, "do not underestimate the waitress." His expression did not change, but something in his eyes did. Something sharper. Something certain. "Next time," he replied, just as calm, "I will not pretend you are one." I held his gaze for 1 second longer, then opened the door and stepped out into the hallway, the sound of it closing behind me soft, controlled, final, but not ending. Because as I walked away, I realized something I had not expected. He had not won. I had not won. And that was exactly why neither of us was finished.